street. Black Lightning's back.
Hello again to all and welcome back into the channel for this week's review of Black Lightning Season 4 Episode 10, which starts the Book of Reunification Chapter 1, which is titled Revelations. Now, if you are new to the channel, please be advised we do deal heavily in spoilers as we discuss each and every detail of these episodes. So, as we might have all expected, the beginning starts to fill us in where the cliffhanger left off from last week. And we straight away get to see the resolution of those tight spots that each of our favorite superheroes were in. And let me just say once again, where would they be without Gambi's tech and the level of contingency planning he's been able to implement within the suits? Jen's suit deploys a protective bubble to stop her from being crushed by her fall. And Gambi activates a cloaking feature or invisibility in Jefferson's suit. But where the show really begins to pull at the strings that will unravel the mystery behind the cystic fibrosis treatment taking place at the hospital, hence playing into the title of this episode, starts right after Grace saves Anissa before being hit head-on by the car. Which, to be clear, wasn't what I quite expected. I thought maybe Anissa's suit would save her, but it turns out Jen's suit did. But in any case, Anissa finds the flash drive that Darius left just before he died, which leads Anissa, Grace, Jen, and TC on a hunt for clues as to why the information was so important. Turns out the hospital wasn't treating patients with cystic fibrosis at all, but was in fact extracting their metagene. Now also, as it turns out, someone from Lynn's lab was responsible for this, which we know to be his Val. Now we don't get any answers as to why, but the fact that Looker from Season 3, as we later find out, is on Tobias' payroll, and the fact that this was already set up in this episode, lets us know that the two might be connected. And just to summarize, what could be going on behind the scenes when it comes to the hospital extracting metagenes from patients could be one of three things. Number one, Tobias could be using the metagenes in some way to power the bracelets, although I'm not certain that that is the answer. Number two, Looker, who we already know is on Tobias' payroll, could somehow be involved with this process to some capacity, and could be revealed to be so in the next few episodes. And number three, Tobias could be using the genes to build a fleet of metahumans that only he can command, which would give more validation to the statement made in this meeting. But more on that in a few minutes. But can we talk about the fact that Anissa went behind Jefferson's back and called Lynn's old boyfriend to get Lynn out of jail? And that moment where they held like a lingering touch, see man? Now I've been saying this since the third review for this season that Tobias was going to somehow try and take advantage of Lynn. And just in case you don't believe me, the link for that will be at the top of this video. But as fate would have it, all it takes is an old flame to spark just enough tension just to make Jefferson feel some type of way. But do you want to know the reason why I thought it was even possible? See, the thing is about sustained trauma, among other things, is that it makes you emotionally vulnerable. And seeing as how Lynn was at her most vulnerable place probably ever since the last episode, you can almost see this happening with Lynn. And for those of you who think that Jefferson has not been himself lately, I second that emotion. And look, I get it. When those in charge sat down to craft the trials and tribulations of the season, they agreed to some degree that the Pierce family would go through it. I mean, like really go through it. But I think they may have forgotten that many of us who love this show were drawn to it more so by the strong family dynamic, which also involved Jefferson just simply being a man, not to mention being readily equipped with good advice. And now that it's the 10th episode, which is more like 3/4 of the season gone, Jefferson has been nothing like himself and has all but crossed the line to the dreaded, ugly thing we call character assassination. I mean, it's to the point now, literally, where like every episode, we don't know what he's gonna say. We don't know what Lynn is gonna say. And like I just said, I get it. They wanted to take the Pierce family out of their comfort zone. But at this point, y'all didn't get tired of beating that dead horse? So another point I want to talk about before we cover the situation with Painkiller, Cameo, and Tobias is Grace, but first Jen, and her decision to number one, jumpstart her powers the way that she did, and then number two, fly back to the ionosphere.
You are reckless.
Now in a show where identity has become the issue as of late, it is noteworthy, I guess, and understandable that Jen would be willing to go through such lens to reclaim a lost part of our identity, even though that might be just temporary. But why does the risk always seem to either outweigh the reward or just render it null and void altogether? So towards the end of the episode, Anissa and Grace get into a disagreement about wanting their powers back, Anissa feels like they are necessary to protect the one she loves, and just like Jen, is what makes her who she is, whereas Grace feels she could do without them, and asks how could they really be a real family while being metas. Now if you've been paying attention to this sentiment, it's not new, and in episode 6 of season 2, they had a similar conversation on this subject, just not in this context. So now I think this will bring about a moment close to or during the finale, where this revelation will be highlighted or mentioned. It's interesting stuff to say the least though. So Lauren finally finds out about Gammy playing her, and she handles it way better than I thought she would have, or most people would for that matter. And also confirming that Tobias somehow got hold of the emitter. And even though she seemed to listen to Gamby in this episode, it will be interesting to see how Lauren deals with this moving forward. So in a scene where we find out that TC has been learning hacking tips from Filk, we get yet another Painkiller Cameo, which at this point is not a cameo. It's more like a regular cutscene to like a supporting character of the show. And as usual, it's trying to get more information to nail Tobias. Now listen, I like Painkiller's character just as much as anybody else does at this point. However, but why does it feel like his character is more welcome than Jefferson these days? I'm just saying. And finally, Tobias, as predicted in one of my earlier videos, has finally taken complete control of the gangs in Freedom, including the mercenary Ishmael. But most importantly, the revelation that we get in this episode comes in the form of finally being introduced to the shadow board that Eve was a part of and that was mentioned way back in season 1.
If I kill Lady Eve without the shadow board's permission, I might as well bury myself with her.
Now seeing as how we get their appearance so late in this season, lets us know that Black Lightning's cancelization was premature. And that's because, seeing as how this is the 10th episode of this season, if this was a regular 16 episode season, it would make sense of their appearance now. But since there are only 3 episodes left, we'll just have to see how it all plays out. And that brings this review to a close. Stay tuned in the Content Meta for more reviews just like this one. Be on the lookout for those real takes dropping on Mondays, and we just might branch out to do other franchises. But until then, see you then.